Alex Harper wasn't the kind of son anyone feared, and Linda Harper wasn't the kind of mother anyone expected to die in terror, yet behind the walls of their quiet blue house a dark game of cruelty was unfolding that would leave an entire town stunned and horrified. The town of Fairview was the kind of place people moved to when they wanted peace and predictability. Rows of neat houses lined quiet streets where the biggest excitement was usually a school bake sale or a neighbor's new car. On the corner of Willow Lane stood a modest blue house with white shutters, a home that looked as warm and welcoming as the woman who lived there. Linda Harper was known for her kindness and steady presence. She worked as a part-time librarian, spent weekends tending her small garden, and always made time to help neighbors when they needed an extra hand. To everyone who knew her, she was a picture of patience and gentle strength, raising her only son, Alex, with the same calm dedication that defined every part of her life. Alex was 19 and carried himself with a quiet, almost detached air. He wasn't the type to draw attention, rarely joining the groups of teenagers who gathered at the park or the coffee shop. To outsiders, he seemed like a shy young man, polite when spoken to and soft-spoken in public. People often described him as reserved, maybe a little awkward, but harmless. Teachers remembered a boy who kept to himself, never causing trouble in class. Linda, proud of her son, believed he simply needed time to grow out of his introverted shell. But those who spent even a few minutes with Alex sensed something they couldn't quite name, a faint chill beneath the polite surface. Behind the front door of the Harper home, life was not as peaceful as it appeared. Linda worked tirelessly to maintain a sense of normalcy, but there were moments when Alex's behavior unsettled her. He had an odd fascination with dark topics, lingering too long over news reports of accidents or violent crimes. While other teenagers might flinch at tragic stories, Alex smirked or made comments that Linda struggled to brush aside. At first, she thought it was just a phase, a young man testing boundaries, exploring the world in his own way. But as the years passed, the jokes grew sharper, the laughter colder. Sometimes, in the middle of an ordinary conversation, he would throw out a remark so cruel or strangely timed that it left Linda speechless. Neighbors occasionally heard raised voices from inside the house, though they never lasted long. Linda rarely confided in anyone, preferring to handle things quietly. Her friends assumed the arguments were typical mother-son disagreements. No one imagined anything more serious. Alex presented a different face to the world when others were around, answering questions with short but polite replies, never revealing the darker thoughts that seemed to occupy his mind. He had a talent for keeping people at a comfortable distance, just close enough to appear normal but never close enough to be understood. As the sun set over Fairview each evening, the blue house on Willow Lane blended into the peaceful glow of the neighborhood. Children rode their bikes past it without a second thought. Parents waved from driveways, and life continued with the easy rhythm of small-town routine. Yet inside that home, something unsettling was quietly taking shape. What looked like ordinary teenage moodiness was slowly hardening into something far more dangerous, and the signs, though subtle, were already there for anyone who cared to look closely enough. As the months passed, the small disturbances around Alex became harder for those nearby to ignore. What once seemed like harmless quirks began to reveal a deeper unease that clung to every interaction he had. Teachers at Fairview High remembered the way his eyes lit up at the mention of disasters during current events discussions. When a class project involved researching historical tragedies, Alex chose the most violent episodes with an eagerness that unsettled his classmates. He would present his findings with a strange, almost cheerful detachment, describing destruction and loss as though recounting the plot of a movie. While others reacted with discomfort, Alex appeared entertained, his faint grin lingering long after the topic had passed. At home, Linda struggled to understand the son she loved so fiercely. She tried to open conversations about his interests, gently steering him toward more positive subjects, but Alex's responses were short and dismissive. He spent long hours alone in his room, the glow of his computer screen spilling into the hallway late into the night. When Linda knocked on his door, he would answer calmly, sometimes with a laugh that carried no warmth. It was the kind of laugh that made her skin tighten, though she could never explain why. She told herself that teenagers were private and that his dark jokes were simply part of a passing phase. Still, an uneasy feeling began to grow inside her, a quiet worrying she pushed aside each morning as she went about her daily routine. Outside the Harper home, neighbors began to notice Alex's odd sense of humor. During a summer block party, he made an offhand remark about how easily accidents could happen, delivering it with a chuckle that froze the conversation. A few people exchanged uneasy glances, but Linda quickly changed the subject, embarrassed and eager to smooth over the moment. Later, when a neighbor's dog was hit by a car, Alex remarked on how funny it was that the animal had run into the street at just the wrong second. His words, spoken without hesitation, left those present speechless. People whispered afterward, but no one wanted to confront Linda directly. After all, Alex had never acted violently, he simply seemed off. Even small acts of cruelty found their way into daily life. When a bird struck the living room window and fell motionless onto the porch, Linda rushed outside, heart aching for the fragile creature. Alex followed her, grinning as he leaned down to examine the tiny body. Instead of sympathy, he commented on how amusing it was that something so alive could stop existing in an instant. Linda forced a smile, masking the dread that crawled up her spine. That night, she lay awake, replaying his words and wondering if she was overreacting or if she was finally glimpsing something she had tried too long to ignore. The town of Fairview continued its quiet routine, but the Harper household was changing in ways invisible to most. Linda clung to the hope that time and love would guide her son back toward the light. Yet every unsettling laugh, every careless remark, hinted that Alex was drifting toward a darkness that no gentle hand could easily pull him from. One cold autumn evening, Linda came home from work feeling unusually tired. At first, she blamed it on the changing weather and a long day at the library. But the heaviness in her body and the sharp ache in her stomach were more than simple fatigue. By the next morning, a persistent fever and a wave of nausea left her barely able to stand. She mentioned her discomfort to Alex, hoping for a bit of concern or even a suggestion to call the doctor, but his reaction was disturbingly flat. He simply shrugged and remarked that illnesses come and go, his voice carrying the faint trace of amusement that Linda had come to dread. Instead of offering help, he watched her carefully, his expression unreadable as she struggled to stay upright. Over the following days, Linda's condition worsened. The once energetic woman found herself confined to bed, her strength draining with each passing hour. Alex moved around the house with a calm that felt unnatural. He prepared simple meals but left them untouched outside her door, sometimes laughing quietly to himself when he heard her coughing fits echo through the hallway. When Linda asked him to call a doctor, he claimed the clinics were too busy or that she only needed rest. His excuses were delivered with a strange cheerfulness, as though he found entertainment in every moment of her decline. Neighbors who occasionally checked in noticed subtle changes. Curtains that were usually drawn open to let in the sunlight now remained tightly closed. The once inviting home felt heavy and airless. A neighbor who came by to drop off groceries sensed something was wrong when Alex answered the door with an odd smile and insisted that his mother was simply sleeping it off. She caught a faint, sour odor drifting from inside, but convinced herself it was nothing more than spoiled food. Like so many others, she left without pressing the issue, uneasy but unwilling to intrude. As Linda grew weaker, Alex began documenting her illness in a way that would later shock investigators. He used his phone to take pictures of her pale face and trembling hands, sometimes scribbling sarcastic notes in a journal about her worsening condition. While she struggled to breathe, he wrote observations about her appearance, noting each symptom as if recording an experiment. He seemed fascinated by her vulnerability, his detached amusement becoming more apparent each day. When she begged for water, he delayed, taking his time as though testing how long she could endure discomfort. The house grew quieter with every passing night, the only sounds the ticking of a clock and Linda's labored breathing. Alex lingered nearby, scrolling through his phone, occasionally letting out a low chuckle that broke the silence like a cruel echo. He never raised his voice or acted in anger. Instead, he maintained an eerie calm, his actions deliberate and measured. By the time a concerned neighbor finally called emergency services after noticing the house dark for days, Linda was barely conscious, her life hanging by a thread that Alex seemed in no hurry to preserve. When emergency services arrived at the Harper home, the late afternoon air carried a sharp chill and the house looked eerily still. The front curtains were drawn tight, blocking out the pale light of day. Paramedics knocked repeatedly before Alex opened the door with a calm, almost cheerful expression. He greeted them with a half smile and a casual tone that immediately unsettled the team. Inside, the air was heavy and stale, carrying a faint odor of sickness that confirmed their fears. They found Linda in her bedroom, barely conscious and struggling to breathe. Her skin was clammy and pale, her pulse weak. The paramedics moved quickly, calling for additional support as they tried to stabilize her. Alex stood nearby, hands in his pockets, watching with an odd curiosity that sent a shiver through the room. Despite the urgency, he offered no helpful information. When asked how long his mother had been sick, he shrugged and muttered something about her not feeling well for a while. His answers were vague, deliberately unhelpful, and delivered with a grin that made the medics exchange wary glances. They rushed Linda to the hospital, where doctors worked frantically, but the damage was irreversible. Within hours, Linda Harper was pronounced dead, leaving the staff shaken not only by her condition but by the unsettling behavior of the son who had brought her there. The coroner's preliminary findings revealed severe dehydration and complications from an untreated infection conditions that could have been managed if medical care had been sought earlier. This discovery raised immediate questions. How could someone living in the same house have failed to notice, or worse, chosen not to act? Detectives assigned to the case returned to the Harper home that evening, determined to piece together what had happened in the days leading up to Linda's death. Inside, they found a scene that felt less like a sickroom and more like a calculated setup. Alex's phone contained dozens of photographs of his mother during her final days, each image captured with clinical precision. Some pictures showed her lying helpless on the bed, others focused on small details: a trembling hand, a half-empty water glass, a clock on the nightstand. Alongside the photos were notes written in Alex's careful handwriting, describing her symptoms with a detached, almost playful tone. Phrases like "still breathing, but slower today" and "funny how quiet the house feels now" revealed a chilling mindset. Investigators were struck not only by the documentation itself, but by the way it seemed designed to mock the suffering it recorded. Further examination of Alex's internet history deepened their concern. He had spent hours researching illnesses that could mimic natural death, searching for ways to delay treatment without raising suspicion. He had even bookmarked articles about how long a person could survive without food or water. To detectives, it was no longer a question of negligence but of intent. As the evidence mounted, neighbors came forward with their own observations. Several admitted to hearing Linda's coughing and moaning through the thin autumn nights. Others recalled Alex's unsettling remarks in recent weeks, comments about how fragile life was or how funny it was that people worried so much about dying. Each testimony painted a clearer picture of a young man who had not only allowed his mother to die but seemed to take pleasure in her suffering. What had first appeared to be a tragic case of delayed care now unfolded as something far more sinister: a deliberate, methodical plan carried out with a coldness that shocked even the most seasoned investigators. The arrest came quietly but carried a weight that rippled through the entire town of Fairview. 2 weeks after Linda's funeral, detectives arrived at the Blue House on Willow Lane with a warrant in hand. Alex opened the door wearing the same faint smile he had worn on the day paramedics came. He did not resist or ask questions. He simply stepped aside as though he had been expecting them all along. Neighbors watched from behind curtains as he was led away in handcuffs, his expression calm and almost amused, as if the unfolding scene was nothing more than an interesting distraction. At the county jail, Alex remained unnervingly composed. During questioning, detectives noted how he answered every inquiry with a relaxed ease, often smirking when describing the final days of his mother's life. He admitted to delaying medical help but insisted he had done nothing directly harmful, claiming that he wanted to see what would happen if he left nature to take its course. The lack of remorse in his tone left investigators chilled. Forensic psychologists later described his demeanor as a textbook display of psychopathy, shallow emotions, no empathy, and an unnerving ability to recount cruelty as if it were a casual observation. The trial that followed drew crowds from across the region. Courtrooms that usually handled small-town disputes were suddenly packed with reporters and curious onlookers. Each day revealed new layers of the case, from the disturbing photos and journals to the search history that detailed Alex's meticulous planning. Prosecutors argued that this was not mere neglect but a calculated killing carried out under the guise of natural illness. They presented evidence of his online research, showing how he had studied ways to prolong suffering while avoiding detection. Witness after witness described his unsettling remarks and inappropriate laughter, each account reinforcing the portrait of a young man devoid of human compassion. Linda's friends and co-workers sat through every session, often in tears as they listened to the clinical descriptions of her final days. Many had known Alex since childhood and struggled to reconcile the polite boy they remembered with the cold figure sitting at the defense table. He showed no visible reaction to the testimonies, occasionally leaning back in his chair with a faint grin, as if the proceedings were a private joke only he understood. The jury watched him carefully, noting every flicker of expression or lack thereof. After weeks of testimony, the verdict came swiftly. Alex was found guilty of manslaughter and aggravated abuse, a decision that carried a heavy sentence. As the judge read the punishment, Alex remained motionless, his eyes scanning the courtroom with that same unsettling calm. Reporters captured the moment when, instead of showing fear or regret, he allowed a short laugh to escape, a sound that echoed through the hushed room like a cruel reminder of the nature of his crime. Fairview was left grappling with the horror of the case long after the trial ended. The tidy streets and quiet evenings felt different now, as if innocence itself had been stolen. Residents who once waved to the boy on Willow Lane now spoke of him in whispers, haunted by the knowledge that someone capable of such cold amusement had lived among them unnoticed. Linda's name became a symbol of a tragedy that could not be explained away, and her story a chilling reminder that evil does not always announce itself with violence. It can hide behind a smile waiting for the moment to strike.